And now, from Glasgow.
So hello there, welcome to the Eddie Stobart stages 132 to 135 part 2. As you know, I wasn't happy with the with what we got for our flooring. This is it there. Personally, I think it's absolutely dreadful. So I came up with an idea of something to make it better, and I'm going to show you an email I received. I sent an email to a company called Tiger Trailers, and I asked them the question: if I was to make a wooden floor, what would the actual dimensions of the beams be? And he told me that they actually use phenolic coated flooring, and he's given me the dimensions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some kind of resiny flooring using these panels. Now, the actual sizes that he's given me is 2,375 millimeters by 1,525 millimeters, with a thickness of 30 millimeters, which we don't need to worry about the thickness. If you reduce that down to 12th scale, that would be 1,900 and about 198 millimeters by 127 millimeters, which means that these are a little bit too wide and far too, let me just have a look. Yep, so obviously it's going to go across that, so the 12 centimeters wants to go across. 12 centimeters wants to go across, and then the length. So this wants to be round about 19 centimeters. It's actually 21 and a half, so I'm going to go with that. And then we want 12 across. This is 19. I'm actually going to cheat a little bit, and I want to cut this in half. So half of this is 97 millimeters, so we are going to make them about that big. This is optional, by the way. You don't need to do this in halves. So what I'm looking at doing is cutting this in half, so we'll end up with 6 panels. So let me show you what I'm going to do, and as if by magic I'm going to switch this panel, and I'm going to do some clever placements of things, because then you can't see my little prep beforehand. So I am going to first of all, sorry, I'm doing the wrong bit first. So what we are going to do, yes, I was right. Sorry, guys. So I'm getting some fine sandpaper. This is 1500 grit. I'd say anything finer than 1000 grit will be absolutely fine, and some kind of block. I wouldn't use anything mechanical like an electric sander. I just think it'd be far too quick. What we want to do is just remove this shiny surface, and we want to do it on both sides, and then we've got a nice clean surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go round circular motion, and this is going to actually do 2 things. First of all, it's going to get rid of that coating on the top, and then as you will see from this first light rubbing, you'll see it's not exactly level. You can see where I've got some shiny bits, and I've got some that have been sanded down. So I'm just going to keep going over this until I get it all consistent, all the way up to the edges. It actually got a little bit of a reduction in size there, and just get it so that just really want to get that top coating off. If you want to go harsher sandpaper, you can. I'm doing this on both sides. It won't make a lot of difference. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use, this is actually a sanding block. It's a little bit too aggressive to use as a final thing, but if I go over it with this, there we go. So that's pretty much got the top surface off, and then because I've used something very rough, I'm going to go over it with finer sandpaper just to smooth it out a bit. Like that. And that has worn me out. I will warn you guys, this is not going to be a fast process. This is going to require a little bit of patience, but it's a nice cheap way to do it. Okay guys, so I have got a panel there, and the next thing I want to do is give that a really good clean. I personally would use anything alcohol based, but I tend to cheat when I clean things. I actually have a homemade airbrush paint thinner, but it's alcohol based, so I'm just going to go over that just to clean up all of that dust that we've created from the sawdust. Make sure we have a clean surface, and because my desk is not the cleanest thing on this earth, I'm going to place that down before I clean this. That you can see the muck coming up on the hole. It's pretty good. Right, so once we've got that cleaned up, again, optional to chop this in half. So I know that it's 197 there we go. So it's, why does that come out wrong? Right guys, so what we're going to do is work out the halfway point. Okay, so my apologies for that break. The maths had gone funny. Right, so this panel is 200 and I'm making it 214 millimeters across. That means the halfway point is 107. So I want to make a mark at 107, which is there, and then I want to make another mark on the other side at 107, which is there, and then that should be our halfway point. Okay, so that's now divided into two. I don't know if you can see the line very well. Now, a word of warning, this being 107 by 195, we're pushing that back up in scale, and I'll try and add the numbers onto the screen. It gives us a panel that's the equivalent of 2,340 millimeters deep, which is about 35 millimeters short, but it gives us a panel of 1,284 across, which is about 360 millimeters too short, which is about that much on the real thing. So obviously if you're not happy with cutting it in half, because once you've cut it in half, it's final. So this is how I'm going to cut it in half. You can use a knife, you can use anything you want. I'm actually going to use a panel scriber, and what this does is primarily used for scale model aircraft, for rescribing panel lines. So let me bring just something random in. This is a model of a Lancaster. So you see there you've got all these panel lines. Now if you were to have to sand this down, you'd sand out those panel lines, and then this is used for just scribing them in. And it's going to require patience, but the most important thing is I cannot have my ruler slip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up perfectly, and I'm going to clamp that down. Okay, and the good thing about this is that I can readjust. Okay, and as I say, you do this at your own risk. I'm actually not going to use these panels, so it doesn't really matter if I get it all wrong. So right, so I've got my steel ruler, and what I'm going to do with this panel scriber, I'm going to just gently run my panel scriber down that line. 3 passes maybe. Okay, and then I'm going to just keep running it backwards and forwards. Now, something I learned, sometimes people state the obvious, and you need that. Most people will pull, or they'll use this panel scriber. I think they usually pull it towards them. That's not bad. You can actually use it forwards as well. Some people find that has more control, but I'm just going to keep just pulling this down. Okay, once I've got a little bit of a gouge, there's less risk of this running wild, so I'm going to use the tip. And like I say, I'm just going to, you're not aiming to do this in one pass. If you can see there, this is the amount of plastic I've removed in a single pass. If you're using a blade, it might require many more passes, but I'm just going to keep passing this down. And to be honest with you guys, I'm having a bit of a struggle at the top, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do, say, maybe 3 passes, and then I'm going to turn it over, and then maybe do 3 passes in this direction. But the key here, guys, is very, very gentle. You're not aiming to cut this in a few passes. It might require 50 passes. Don't know how well you can see that, but I'm probably not even a quarter of the way through. Okay guys, so I am going to continue doing this. For as long as I need. Okay, and what you'll actually find is once you've got so far deep in, you won't actually need the ruler, because this panel line scriber will just follow the groove that you've created. Once it's gone a certain depth. So like you see there, in fact, actually, you could leave it there if you want. Maybe not even cut it all the way through. Can you tell I haven't actually done this before? I'm just going with a theory. So I'm just gonna, I think I'll do just a few more passes, and I don't think I'm even going to cut all the way through. So there we go, guys. That I'll leave it there actually. So that now looks like 2 panels that are stuck together. The only issue I'll have is what will it look like when the next panel is next to it. Obviously disregarding the shininess, does that look like separate panels? Yeah, I think we'll go with that. Right, okay guys, so that is the first stage done. The next stage that I want to do is I want to paint this. Now, there are many ways to paint this. Well, I say many, 2 really. One is to brush paint it, and one is to airbrush it. I want to go for the airbrush option, but I have found in the past it's very difficult to find. I don't like brush painting with primer. If you're a rattle can person, ever so simple, done. I've recently been using this primer. This is AK Interactive, a 3rd generation primer. This actually goes on quite well with a brush. The primer I was using previously is this Stylorez. This is absolutely dreadful if you are going to brush paint it, but this is a good primer for either airbrushing or brush painting. Either or, doesn't matter, and I find it's very forgiving. Because I'm going to airbrush, I'm going to use my Stylorez, and I would go black. Personally, I would go black. So what I'm going to do is I'll have to take a cut because I've just got to set my airbrush up, and I'll see you in a moment. Okay, so I have got my airbrush ready. I've got some primer in there. I'm not going to give you lessons on priming. If you know how to prime, fantastic. If you don't, there are videos out there that tell you how to do it. Thin your primer if you want to thin it in the way that you normally would. I do like to thin my primer a little bit. It often means I have to put more coats on, but I got a bit of an obsession with thin paints with these airbrushes. So make sure you've got some paint. Now, when you prime, what you want to do is keep your finger down on the air all the time, and you want to actually start priming there. Work your way across and stop there. You can come backwards if you want, and you want slightly overlapping layers, and you're going to do it in 3 stages. Stage 1 is a light dusting, so you're just going to get a little bit on the so just bear with me a sec. I have given this a clean, but I just want to run this down. The reason being, I'm not cutting it, I'm actually removing any debris from inside. So what I'm going to do, layer 1 is going to be a light coating. It's what they call a light dusting. So we are just going to go across, and we're just going to cover all of it with some primer. You're hardly going to notice it, like so. And I'm deliberately doing half just to show you what I've done. Now the purpose of primer is to give the paint something to stick to. Paint doesn't always stick to plastic too well. That's still actually not light enough. There we go. Now what primer will do, primer will bind to the actual plastic, and the paint will stick to the primer. So there we go, that's not a bad first coat. Okay, so I'm just going to carry on doing this. Just give it doesn't even have to be a rough, an even coverage, just get some primer on it, get it all over. Okay, so that's the first layer down. So it's just got that coverage. It actually looks a lot lighter than it really is, but that's you'll notice there's been a couple of areas where I've stopped, which I shouldn't have done. Right, so once we've got that first layer down, I've actually got a wet spot there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at doing total coverage. Okay, we're not looking to flood it, we're just looking to give it a nice solid coat. Now that might require a couple of coats, you might get it in one. And what I'm doing is I'm really pulling back on the trigger, I'm letting all of the primer out. Okay, and I'm still going to consider that a dusting. It does really look. Why is that? and that's pretty much fully covered. Don't know why the red is coming through. Okay. That's a lot better now. Don't know if I had an issue with my airbrush, but okay, so that's pretty much covered now, and where we have a little look at it, it's still coming through quite red, but this is the absolute basics of airbrushing. Okay, so once we feel that we've got the coverage on it, I've actually run out of primer, so and I seem to be blocked. There we go. Right, so once I feel I've got full coverage, don't know what's going on with my airbrush today. Usually much better than this. Right, there we go. So once we've got the full coverage, you'll see that that's not dry yet, but once it's dry, and you'll know when it's dry because it'll go matte. You can speed up the drying by adding air, just air, but make sure there's no puddles. If you look at that blob there, it's just wet, so we'll just gently spray that with the air and see how it goes matte once it's dry. Okay, and then if there's any patches that I can see, I'll just go over it. The reason we're getting the patches is because it is thinned down, but that's the way I like to prime. If you are confident and you know what you're doing with an airbrush, then by all means go for it in one coat, but it is recommended that you do 3 stages. So as I say, stage 1 is just a light dusting, and then stage 2 is coverage. So let me show you stage 3, just get this dried off. Okay, so for stage 3, I'm just going to top up my my primer a little bit. I'm just going to thin it down a little bit further. So if you thin this maybe 2 parts thinner, 2 parts primer, 1 part thinner, maybe put another part of primer thinner in, so it's just nice and thin. And what we're going to do is we're going to do what we call the wet stage, and we're going to give that nice full coverage, and it's going to end up wet, hence it's called the wet stage. Now, one good thing about the primer is it's very forgiving, so if you were to just pop a little bit too much primer on and it becomes a little bit flooded, it's okay, just go with it. Okay, and that's 1 panel done. Now obviously we do need to do the edges and the back, but I'm going to do mine 1 stage at a time, and I'm just going to let that dry. So I'm going to come back to you guys when I have done the back. Like I say, the back is exactly the same, and the whole thing will be coated in a black paint. And I personally would recommend, once you've done this, leave it overnight. So maybe do all the panels one day, and then do all the backs of them the next day, and then just come back to it. So guys, I'll see you when my panels are ready. Okay, so I have primed this. I've left it overnight. You can leave it this color if you want, and that's absolutely fine. So if you're happy with it being black, skip to the next stage, ignore what I'm about to show you. But what I'm actually preferring to do, I'm using a rubber black. So this is AK Interactive 3rd generation. I'm sure there are other brands that do rubber black, but I particularly like this one. This is AK 11027 rubber black, and I really like it because it's got this kind of oily, browny, grainy, grey kind of colour. So I'm going to do it with this colour now. I'm actually using a slightly different airbrush. I just need the colour to come through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this in stages. Now this is the way I paint. It may not be the same as you, but what I like to do is I like to go over it. I'm only painting the top, by the way. I'm not going to bother doing the bottom because it's pretty much not going to be seen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over this, and this is very thin paint, guys. So I'm painting very thin layers. It is going to require patience, and I'm just going to go up to the line just to show you on the on camera, and it's going to take quite a few layers, maybe 3 or 4, maybe more. It depends on how you thinned your paints, but I want this a nice smooth finish, and you can see already, guys, it's just starting to come in. It does look brighter on camera, but it's got this nice, well, as you'd expect, rubbery colour. Okay, and once I've sprayed the first layer on, it's going to be uneven because of the way that I'm spraying. I'm kind of doing a more rounded motion. This is me from doing aircraft, actually, where you want the uneven colour, and it's I'm finding it a hard habit to get out of. But it may not actually be a bad thing to do, because this, I do not believe, once this has been used for a while, it's not actually going to stay the same evenness all over. Now one thing I do, it's 2 things I do that I shouldn't do. First of all is I'm not wearing a glove. You may have noticed that. Now the consequence of that is that primer especially really does stick well to skin, and I will have a hard job washing it off. Second thing, I should really be using a cap on my airbrush. If I shake too hard, that paint's going to go everywhere. But it's, you know, us YouTubers, we tell you to do one thing and then we do something completely different. Just want to pull that back. That is back. Okay, why is that not? I seem to be having problems with this. This particular airbrush has quite a small needle, so you have to thin the paints even more, otherwise they get stuck in the nozzle. Okay guys, so obviously, like I say, I would be doing this whole panel normally, but I just want to show you for the colour comparison. Okay, so that's starting to come in. It's still a little bit blotchy, so what we do is we just come in, we look for the blotchiness, we put a thin layer of paint on, and then we release the paint and we just have the air coming through, and that will start to even up that colour. I really should be doing straight lines, but it's the muscle memory is because I'm normally doing aircraft and I normally do sun bleached, so this tends to be how I paint. Anyone who tells me I'm wrong, I'm going to disagree with you. I will agree that it's not the best method, but you see that's starting to come in a lot more even now. but do make sure the previous layer is dry before you go over with the next layer. And the little cheat is that you just turn off the paint. You see, like, there's the paint on, there's the paint off, but always keep your finger down on the air, and then once you get that matte finish, it's dry. It looks glossy when it's wet. This isn't coming out. What is going on? I do actually find that, much as I love this AK paint, it does kind of separate in the cup quite a lot. Okay, and I'm just going to keep going until it's nice and even. So I'm not quite there yet, but you can see that colour coming in. It looks a lot more rubbery. I do love this colour. It's probably my favourite colour out of all of the paints that are available by any brand. I use this for my tyres of aircraft, and it really is a lovely colour. I'm not normally a black person. I mean, most people know my favourite colour is purple, and this is nothing like purple. There we go, guys. We're really getting there now. And you know, if you want to keep it uneven, you just keep going until you're happy with the look. And you don't have to use this colour. I did a bit of research on the meaning of, I can't remember the word now, I do struggle with pronouncing it, but it comes out as meaning some kind of resin coating, and on the picture on the email it looks a bit black, so I'm going for a rubbery colour. There we go. That is almost there. Almost there. So we're just looking for any bits that we're not happy with. We're just going to go over them until we are happy with them. And there we go, guys. I did want to do an edited version of this, but I seem to have just kind of carried on. That's a lot better, isn't it? So there is one half of the panel done. Oh, I seem to have bits here that need doing more. That's getting there now. That's getting there. So just keep going over until the panels are. Now obviously if you had a spray can, this would probably be a lot quicker. But that is that done, so that you can see the comparison between the two colours. What I'm going to do is off camera, don't forget to do the edges as well, guys. I don't think you need to do the back. So we'll just do the back, the sides. And that will be that done for that stage. Okay guys, so I'm going to get on with the rest of it and I'll see you when it's done. Okay, so for the purposes of video, I'm calling that done. As you can see, I've only done one side. That's black. That's rubber black. Now, the most important thing now is that we want to seal that in, so that if we went up to it now and we scratched it, we can actually remove the paintwork. So what I'm using is, this is my choice. This is Vallejo Mecha varnish. I'm using a satin varnish. Now again, if you have your own varnish, I'm not going to judge you. Use that varnish if you feel that something's really good. I'm not here to do a product review. Now, when you varnish, what's going to happen is it's going to discolour it. Let me show you on something. I haven't really got anything to show. I'll probably show you on the actual product then. So I have thinned this. I've thinned it 50-50. That's how I like to do my varnish. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a nice little layer on there. And it's all of a sudden not coming out. Why is that? There we go. So when you put the varnish on, it's very hard to see, but it's actually going to give it a slightly blue tinge. Don't worry, when it dries it will dry clear. And then what I'm going to do, I'm pretty much going to do this the same way as the primer. I'm going to put a little layer on. And I'm going to, this is more of a dusting, just get it covered. Okay, and it will self-level. One of the good things about the varnishes. And I think I want to just thin that a little bit more. It's just a tiny bit thick for my liking. And I'm going to put 2 or 3 good layers of varnish on, and then we can call it done. And that varnish, believe you me, will do absolute wonders for it. So I've got a little spot there. Just want to protect it against any knocks, and obviously this will be on show, so it will get knocks, especially if you're going to add anything to it. One idea that I had for this was to make some palettes, which I think are possible. That's something I'm looking into at this particular stage. It's not planned, it's just being researched. Okay, as you can see, it has changed the colour a little bit. Varnish will do that, it will make it slightly darker. Okay, now I'm calling this the equivalent of 2 layers, and the important thing about varnish, you do want to let it sit overnight. Let it really harden. Okay, one of the things I don't like about varnish, it's really hard to tell when it's dry. Because obviously paints, matte paints, when they're wet, they have this glossy finish, and then as they dry they go matte. So you can easily tell when it's dry because of the matte finish, but obviously gloss varnishes are the worst because they have that glossy finish. Okay, so that's the first layer almost complete, and I am actually changing directions on this, guys. So you see I've gone across that way. My next layer I'm going to go, what's the word I'm looking for? Perpendicular, is that the word? You know, it's been a long time since I've used maths and science terms. Remember, I'm using very thin down coats, so I'm using roughly, I've estimated, I haven't measured scientifically, but I think I'm about 1 part varnish, 1 part thinner. And I'm just going over that, make sure I get the edges, and that is starting to look really nice actually. But if it does go a bit white or a bit blue, don't panic, because it will dry crystal clear, I promise you. I'm just going to keep going over. Now I was, as I say, I was going to edit this video, but I'm actually doing real time. Why in particular I'm not 100% sure. Do you need to see all of this? But there we go. So just get that dried. And the reason I'm using a satin finish, I don't want a big glossy finish. I want it to just be, I don't want it really matte. I want that kind of, well, that rubbery look. Okay. and I think I'll do one more layer. That's almost there, isn't it? I'm just going to thin this a little bit more. There we go. Right, so this will be my final layer, and I'm just going to let this one dry naturally. Okay. Again, this varnish is a little bit forgiving. If you do go slightly thicker in places, it should be slightly forgiving. There we go, guys. Right, so that is the final coat. That is wet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to leave it overnight. I'll just leave it until it dries naturally, and then I'll show you the results. But please do avoid touching any surfaces until it is completely dry. Like I say, I would recommend this is left overnight in an environment where it can't get dust on it, because any dust that comes on it will actually stick to it, and then once it's dry it will be embedded. Okay, so I've got a couple of white spots there, namely one in the top corner there. Don't know if you can see, it's gone a little bit there, a little bit white, a little bit blue. I'm just not going to worry about it because I know it will dry clear. So guys, I will see you when it's finished. Okay, so this is going to be difficult to see because obviously I've got the roof struts in, but what I've done is I've placed two of the red panels in place, and then I've done my it's not fully cured yet, but it is dry enough that I can actually use it. I've actually got the worst panel by accident. I've noticed that these panels, you've got to kind of wedge them in, but this one, I think it's ever so slightly not as wide as the others, but it's good for a comparison, and for a cost of a little bit of primer and a little bit of paint and a little bit of varnish, which is less than the cost of one magazine, I think I've improved that an awful lot. You see how it looks like panels? So obviously by the time this is finished, by gouging that line through the middle, it actually looks like 8 smaller strips, very similar to the dimensions that the very kind people at Tiger Trailers has given us. So I'll finish this with a closer look at the panel. I'm actually quite impressed with it. I like it, and that's but I won't actually be going for this, so I'm actually going to do a third method. Now what I'm doing next week is I'm actually going to be creating a wooden flooring. Now at the time of filming on the 15th of May, which is a couple of weeks, well, it's a week before this video is going to come out, I've been told that there's going to be a delay on the next pack. I have a plan, but the problem is I actually go back. I work, as you all know, I work away, and I will be going at the end of this week. Obviously this has got a release date of the 22nd of May. I'm actually going on the 26th of May. If the packs don't arrive by the 26th of May, I can't have any videos for the next 3 weeks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just stretch the flooring out for 2 issues, possibly 3, so that at least we've got some content, which of course will make the videos a little bit smaller. If I haven't received the issues by the time I go away, then unfortunately there will be no Eddie Stobart until the 19th of June or even later. I'm back on the week involving the 19th of June for 1 week, but I do actually have another part work, so I will have a video for you on the Wednesday I'll be honest with you, it does me a little bit of favour with the other part works. But what I'll be doing is, for some reason they delayed the subscriptions, but the magazines are available via the online shop. So once the issue 140 is released, what I'll probably do, if I haven't already got my issues, I will cancel my subscription and buy the last issues via the shop. Anyway, look, enough waffling for now. I'm going to go now. Tell me your thoughts, guys. Do you think that's an improvement, or do you think I've ruined it? You know, I like it. I do like it. So guys, I will see you in the next video, which is going to be issues 132 to 135, part 3, part 1, or something like that. Part 3-1. So I'll see you then, guys. Take care. Bye bye.